TV shows, sports and TV shows streams going live on YouTube, streaming live on YouTube. Okay, I'm gonna do a little Ted Bundy here. Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes. There's 4 episodes. This was actually on Netflix, but I'm actually on my app on my called BTV. I wonder if it's gonna play. I can play it with an external video player. I'll do the Woofy player. It's connecting.
I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea who I was dealing with. But I knew it was a hell of a story. So I went into the prison with my tape recorder. And I asked him, what sort of person could have done these things?
Police say he was armed with a heavy oak log. He clubbed and then strangled to death 20-year-old Lisa Levy and 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. At least one of them was raped.
He insisted that he was innocent. I wanted him to tell me who was he.
Diabolical genius, deceptive, manipulative.
He's also a former social worker and a political campaign activist.
I considered him a friend, and he was a very nice person.
I felt a connection with him, a feeling of wanting to be loved.
I wanted to know what went through his mind, what led up to it.
Our son is the best son in the world. He was a very normal, active boy.
His mom and dad took him to church every Sunday.
He wanted to be successful as an attorney or as a politician.
What are the elements of the crimes? Why the victims?
This man on the FBI's 10 most wanted list has been captured in Florida.
Suspected of dozens of sex killings in Washington State, Idaho, Utah, and Colorado.
The discovery of the skeletal remains of 6 women.
More than 20 young women in 5 states.
Beaten and strangled.
Abduction, nude bodies.
We found the parts of 4 skulls.
Sexually molested, bludgeoned, raped.
At least 36 sex killings.
Mutilation, necrophilia.
Sexually mutilated.
By mouth, by teeth.
Bite marks.
He had sex with them after they were dead.
Why did you do it?
It's quite a mystery.
So he looked at me and grabbed my tape recorder. Then he twisted in his chair and was cradling it like this. And off he went.
It is almost Saturday, 9 o'clock in the evening. My name is Ted Bundy. I've never spoken to anybody about this. I am looking for an opportunity to tell the story as best I can.
I mean, I'm not an animal, I'm not crazy, I'm not a personality. I mean, I'm just a normal individual.
Joe Berlinger is actually the director of this TV series. He directed a Ted Bundy movie too with Zac Efron called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile.
I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy. It is a crisis of confidence.
The 70s, an angry era.
Now why it freeze up all of a sudden?
Inflation, Vietnam.
It came back.
Watergate, Iran. Demonstrations and riots, the rip-off, the scam, the hustle, the cheat.
See, there's like 4 series. Handsome Devil, One of Us, Not My Turn to Watch Him, and Burn Bundy Burn. Maybe I can play this with subtitle.
I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea who I was dealing with. But I knew it was a hell of a story. So I went into the prison with my tape recorder. And I asked him, what sort of person could have done these things?
Police say he was armed with a heavy oak log. He clubbed and then strangled to death 20-year-old Lisa Levy and 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. At least one of them was raped.
He insisted that he was innocent. I wanted him to tell me who was he.
Diabolical genius, deceptive, manipulative.
He's also a former social worker and a political campaign activist.
I considered him a friend, and he was a very nice person.
I felt a connection with him, a feeling of wanting to be loved.
I wanted to know what went through his mind, what led up to it.
Our son is the best son in the world. He was a very normal, active boy.
His mom and dad took him to church every Sunday.
He wanted to be successful as an attorney or as a politician.
What are the elements of the crimes? Why the victims?
This man on the FBI's 10 most wanted list has been captured in Florida.
Suspected of dozens of sex killings in Washington State, Idaho, Utah, and Colorado.
The discovery of the skeletal remains of 6 women.
More than 20 young women in 5 states.
Beaten and strangled.
Abduction, nude bodies.
We found the parts of 4 skulls.
Sexually molested, bludgeoned, raped,
At least 36 sex killings.
Mutilation, necrophilia.
sexually mutilated.
My mouth, my teeth.
Bite marks.
He had sex with them after they were dead.
Why did you do it?
It's quite a mystery.
So he looked at me and grabbed my tape recorder. Then he twisted in his chair and was cradling it like this. And off he went.
It is almost after 9 o'clock in the evening. My name is Ted Bundy. I've never spoken to anybody about this. But I am looking for an opportunity to tell the story as best I can.
I mean, I'm not an animal, I'm not crazy, I'm an almost good personality. I mean, I'm just a normal individual.
I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy. It is a crisis of confidence.
The 70s.
I don't know why it keeps pausing. I don't know why it plays like this. It plays like crap.
Vietnam, Watergate, Iran, demonstrations and riots, the ripoff.
I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea who I was dealing with. But I knew it was a hell of a story. So I went into the prison with my tape recorder. And I asked him, what sort of person could have done these things?
Police say he was armed with a heavy oak log.
He clubbed and then strangled to death 20-year-old Lisa Levy and 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. At least one of them was raped.
He I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea who I was dealing with.
But I knew it was a hell of a story.
So I went into the prison with my tape recorder. And I asked him, what sort of person could have done these things?
Police say he was armed with a heavy oak log. He clubbed and then strangled to death 20-year-old Lisa Levy and 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. At least one of them was raped.
He insisted that he was innocent. I wanted him to tell me who was he.
Diabolical genius, deceptive, manipulative.
Is also a former social worker and a political cap.
Fracture glass prints are from first.
on, this will be fun. You having fun?
Yes.
Fun.
I want to have some fun.
It was early in 1974 when Ted started acting differently towards me. One day I came home and I found him inside my apartment. He laid down his head on my lap and just sobbed. He told me that he had to tell me something that I would probably be shocked about. He told me that he was going to drop out of law school. He said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I talked about not being able to concentrate. I was very surprised that he was having this meltdown. I know now in hindsight what he was talking about. Fantasizing all the time was what he was talking about, that he couldn't concentrate, he couldn't go to class because he was fighting the obsession to kill people.
Know how you can end dishwashing forever? Let your husband do the dishes. Who am I kidding? We know who's gonna do them. You.
Women are supposed to be selfless, self-sacrificing, and helpful. And if you're selfish, look out for yourself, you're evil.
Women are conditioned to be nice in two ways. They're told that's a nice thing to do, and they're told that if they don't, something bad is going to happen. You see it in dramatic films and television. You see it everywhere you go.
How would you like to waste away on a moon, huh?
I remember the honeymooners. The husband was always threatening the wife.
Bang, zoom. Get my supper.
And people laughed. And as a little kid, I thought, well, I guess it's okay to hit your wife. My dad told me I could do anything. He loved having women in law enforcement because he said they gave a different perspective. That they could get things and ask people things that a man couldn't ask, especially with children and female victims. He told me what to take in college and to follow my dreams. I was at Central Washington State in Ellensburg. Most of the girls that I knew went on to secretarial school. I took secretarial classes because I knew I wanted to work through college. I started out as a secretary at the campus police department in Ellensburg, but I wanted to do something more. Then the chief saw how well I was doing, and he knew that my dad had been a cop. And he said, I think you need to go to the police academy. So he sent me to the police academy, and I was the only female out of a class of 38. It was a dream that girls didn't dare dream. On television, there was highway patrol. There was never any women in that, unless they were the secretary or a file clerk. 77 Sunset Strip, no women in that except being conquered by the men in a sexual manner.
All right. You've released your tensions.
But I don't like being the emotional outlet.
I had a hard time dealing with the men that were in my department. I have spoken to men that have told me, oh yeah, we did all these horrible things to women to make them quit, and sometimes it worked. And they would laugh about that.
I was a detective with King County Police in Seattle. It was a time when there were no other women other than the 4 who were in my police academy class. And the rules or regulations required that you be a certain height and a certain weight. And I didn't meet the weight requirement. I was too thin. And so I did have to bulk up in order to pass the physical exam. But I didn't let any of that stand in my way.
It is graduation day for the National Academy. Members of the class represent almost every type of United States law enforcement agency, as well as students from other countries.
In our senior seminar, an FBI agent came to the class to do a briefing, and he was a very poster boy, if you will, for the FBI. A good looking, told great stories, made the FBI sound as if it was the best place to work in law enforcement. He provided job applications for the special agent position to all of the people in the class who were male. But when it came to me, he said, I'm sorry, I can't give you an application to be an agent. The FBI doesn't hire women as FBI agents.
We have very few leads in the disappearance of Linda Healy, although since the last time that we made a press release on this, we have interviewed 65 people. We have not ruled out any case of foul play here.
I was living in Seattle at the time that Linda Healy went missing. So her disappearance was very shocking. And there were dozens of theories about who could have taken her, and there were very few clues.
I was sitting at my dining room table with Ted. I was living in the U District at that time. And there was an article in the newspaper. A college co-ed had been abducted from her bedroom just a few blocks from where I was living. And her roommates were home and nobody heard anything. So I commented on, like, how can that happen? How could people not hear what was going on? And he did tell me that I needed to be aware at all times. And I had a back door that went downstairs to the basement apartment. And it had this lock on it. And he said, you know, you really should change that. He said, that's dangerous. Ted really seemed to like being a family unit. I think he was looking for stability. It seemed like he'd been in kind of a drift mode before. And I think he was really just wanting to, like, be a part of something.
It was the avenue into my mother's heart to win me over. He probably looked at me and saw a lonely little girl in an unfamiliar place, and I'll just charm her. And it was not hard at all. I thought he was marvelous. He just delighted me, and he took part in raising me. I felt him to be somewhat magical, actually, as a child. He could jump very high off the ground, run very fast, and he didn't have to think about springing into action. He just moved. I saw that with him many times. And one time he had caught something that was falling off a shelf. It was behind him as he sat in a chair, and he didn't even turn his head. He just caught it with his hand. I mean, he was really uncanny with his physical connectedness and his vision of everything without looking at it. He was a lot like an animal would be, seeing you without looking at you.
The conflict in the first couple of years was that I wanted to get married and he wasn't ready to commit. You know, he was reluctant, and I knew that, but we got the marriage license, and then he picked a fight and tore the marriage license into a million little pieces, and that was the end of that. After he ripped it up, I thought, well, the problem is me. I've got to just back off and not be so persistent about wanting this.
I got a call from Chief Pickles, who was the chief of police for the Central Washington State College. He said, Susan Rancourt's missing. And I said, what happened? He said, she just disappeared. This is a missing young woman who would never disappear. She's very responsible. She's bright. She's a good student. She volunteers. And she has worked for our department as a volunteer.
Susan was bright, inquisitive. She just excelled in learning, always reading. I'd move her bed to clean under it. She had every school paper from kindergarten tucked under her bed in neat piles. That was her life, going to school, going to college. She was in her element.
She smiled all the time. It seemed like she was a smile. She smiled all the time. She was very upbeat, and
she was interested in the sciences. She was one of those that would have kept learning forever.
Susan had left the resident assistant meeting at the library and took off towards her dorm, and that was the last anybody saw her.
her roommate called and said, Sue didn't come home last night. I said, are you serious? What's going on? Mom and Dad, we all went over to campus. We just stopped and we went over.
And that was when my husband started yelling, my daughter's missing, something's happened. He was screaming loud and clear. The Boy Scouts came in and did a ground search, alleys, sheds. They even lifted up manhole covers. My brother had a friend that had a private airplane, and they flew a grid over the area. She had on a yellow raincoat, and they were hoping that they could spot that.
We didn't know what our next step could even be. We were just mystified. And my husband and I were driving home through the mountains, and I just remember keeping my eyes on the window the whole time.
Looking for that yellow
thinking I'm going to
raincoat.
find that yellow ski coat. And I thought, if I find it, a ditch would be, we just need to find it. We need to find her. We have to keep on so we can help her or find her, or bring this to a close.
And there were so many different districts of law enforcement, and they were so territorial that they didn't really band together.
It was like pulling rusty old nails out of an old tree to get any information, to get any cooperation from the departments. And when I started looking at the case, I noticed that there was no evidence, nothing collected. I heard a rumor that a man had worn bandages around his arm. He needed help and was approaching girls at a library on campus. And at the library is where I believe she met a man with bandages around his arm. Somebody needs help, you go help them.
He knew that one of our vulnerabilities was to be nurturing and helpful and to care. Here you have a wounded human being, and for most of us, particularly at that time, wouldn't think of not helping. I was a student at the University of Washington, and I was deeply immersed in the anti-rape movement. I began teaching women in order to defend themselves, to feel more empowered. Somebody looked at me and said, "Hey, you know karate, why don't you teach self-defense?" You keep saying you got something from me. Something you call love. What I tried to do was get women to question the messages that they got as they were growing up.
Last year there were like 20 movies in which they showed women being raped. Sure. But in like Deliverance, where some guy's getting raped, you know, people are shocked. But nobody thinks anything of it. When women are raped in films, it's just the way things are.
Women were afraid to defend themselves because they'd grown up learning that if you try to defend yourself, you'll get killed. So there was a big incentive not to fight back, and that your fate lay only in submitting.
The best thing to do if you're in a rape situation is submit until it hurts, because it's going to hurt a lot less in the long run.
They have methods of self-defense, they have programs for girls, but the average girl on the street that's hitchhiking says, it couldn't happen to me, so she doesn't take that self-defense.
Self-defense course wouldn't help her. A self-defense course would get her killed is what it gets.
Hey, Jeff, the woman that I was with, Jeff, she fought back and she's dead.
Saying that women shouldn't fight back or they'll be killed, it's more than women are weak. To me, it's like an emotional threat that's thrown over the entire universe of women. Submit to us or we're going to kill you.
We have a local festival that's in our area in Pierce County. It's a fun festival that promotes the daffodil bulb business, and it's been around for a long time. And I was selected from my high school as the daffodil princess. And Georgianne was a representative from her high school, and that's how we met. We did a lot of really cool stuff. We went down to Olympia, our capital, and we met the governor and his wife. We went on the USS Missouri, where they signed the World War II peace treaty. We also went to Seattle. We went to Space Needle, had lunch. This friendship really blossomed because we were together a lot. And from there, we lived together at the Theta House at the University of Washington. There was the Theta House, the Fiji House, the Gamma Phi House. They affectionately call that Greek Row. And it's sororities and fraternities on both sides. So we're right there. I mean, you walked out in the front steps, you could see across the street the entrance to the campus. We walked on campus every day, right from the sorority, and had a great group of people that we were around all the time. Everything was possible.
It was a Saturday night, and my parents came up from Utah. The tradition in the Mormon faith is that when you're 8 years old, you get baptized. And so I was going to have my daughter Molly baptized, and my dad was going to do the baptism. And so we went out to dinner the night before, and Ted treated us all to pizza. He was in a big hurry to go after we were done with pizza. The next day, he didn't show up. We completely missed the baptism. It was probably 2 hours late. And after it was all done, he showed up at the church. And I forget what he said was the excuse, car trouble or something like that. I was mad because he was making me look bad in front of my parents. But, you know, we never in our wildest dreams thought he was out abducting people.
The information that has come to us explained that she had disappeared on the early part of June 1st.
I wasn't aware that Brenda Ball had been abducted that night until many years later. You know, she was seen talking to a man with a cast on his arm, but the police didn't connect it together with the other abductions that went on in the Pacific Northwest.
We had these giant trees out front that covered the lights, and so it was fairly dark. I went down the steps, and there was a man that was at the foot of the steps on crutches, holding a gas can, and he had a cast on his leg. And he said, "Can you help me?" And I said, "Sure." He goes, "I ran out of gas. It's just up the way. I'm having a horrible time trying to carry this gas can." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure." And so I picked it up, and he said, "I'm going to put some gas in the car if you would get inside." It was a Volkswagen Bug. When I got in, and he said, "When I tell you in a minute, there's a button that's underneath the steering wheel area. If you would push that, because I'm having car trouble." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he says, "Okay, well, I'll let you know." And I said, "All right." And so I'd been just not a long time, maybe a minute, maybe two. All of a sudden, it was just like this cold chill. I was like, "Wait, something's not right here. This isn't right. This just isn't right." I mean, I just felt it, you know, that sixth sense that you have. And I jumped up out of the car and I took off running. And I said, "Sorry, bye." And I left. And I never thought a thing about it, ever, until, well, after George.
Georgianne Hawkins was last seen Monday evening shortly after midnight. She had been visiting at the Beta House and was returning to her house just a half block away down this alley. Police believe she went along this route and then somewhere she disappeared.
She was walking down the alleyway towards our back door. One of the Betas stuck his head out and said, "Hey George, where are you going?" "Oh, I got a Spanish final in the morning. I got to get back and study." And so there was some activity down the alleyway, and she looked down and then looked back at Dwayne and said, "Okay, hasta luego," and waved goodbye to him. And my room faced the alleyway, and I was on the second story with the window open studying, and I didn't hear a sound. So the next day, we spoke to Mrs. Bates, which was our house mother at the time that lived in the sorority, and immediately we had it on news that night.
It's unreal, and it's a nightmare, and nothing in anybody's manual would prepare you for something like this. Mostly they're frightened, and I sense a good deal of anger.
Against whom?
Against anyone who would feel they had the right to walk into the middle of a young lady's life and disrupt it in this way.
Do you suspect foul play in this disappearance?
I think it's too early to suspect any foul play. We just got the case this morning, and it's hard to say whether there's any foul play or not.
It was all over the news. When we walked out, they were there, they being the reporters. "We want to do an interview, we want to get this." And you can see I'm almost flip about it.
You knew Georgianne for quite a while.
I met Georgianne in December '72, and she was very outgoing, and quite studious also.
She involved in a lot of activities.
When I make that little comment, you can even see the smile on my face. Well, she's quite studious too, when I said that. And I was being kind of funny because I wanted her mom specifically to know that she did study. It wasn't like she was partying or anything. And after they cut the cameras down, I said, "Oh man, George's gonna love that I said that." I remember saying that, "She's gonna love that I said that." And we were kind of giggling about it. Because I honestly at that time, never believed for a moment that she was gone, that she was not coming back to us.
Did she give you any kind of an idea of where she was going on the night that
She turned missing.
Well, she went and visited her boyfriend, and she was en route to home, and she had a final the next morning, and she didn't show up for the final. I talked to the professor the next day, and he said he was really surprised that she didn't show up.
Of course, we had no idea where George was. We didn't, I don't know. In my mind, I just knew she wasn't there, but never in a million years thought she wasn't coming back. Even though she's never left before, she never spent the night, she never did any of that. We always knew where she was. She was very careful. I pray for her every night. Heck, she's still very much in my world. She really is.
When Georgianne Hawkins disappeared from the University of Washington, immediately I thought it was the same guy, because he was so surreptitious, he was so sneaky. He just knew how to do it, how to make somebody disappear. It was just like the earth swallowed them up and they were gone. I was getting missing person notices from the Seattle Police Department, King County, because I had friends on both departments, as well as my father's friends, that were helping on the investigation. So I was assigned the missing girls case because I had the most access of any of the officers. They were popping up, and I knew there had to be a connection because it all happened on a college, university campus. And they were all the same age. And they were all within a couple months of each other. Was abducting these girls, and I think that they're being murdered. And with the highway system that had been developed at that time, he could make it from one place to another.
What is needed is one overall master plan for our roads and highways. In this plan, there will be no intersections. Access will be controlled. It will really unite all of our United States.
When the interstates finally came to Seattle, it was a real game changer. They allowed people to go farther, faster, and in a sense more anonymously than in the past. It was giving you high-speed access to very rural and wilderness areas.
It didn't take very long for the dream of the interstates, the dream of social mobility, to start morphing into a kind of nightmare. If you look at a map of the region where women were going missing, it's pretty clear that the killer was using the highways in order to find victims.
Most people in Seattle had the thought that Linda Healy's case was the beginning of something when Georgianne Hawkins went missing from just blocks away from where Linda went missing. Once Georgianne disappeared, women became unnerved. It was a palpable nervousness. The attention of the media, of course, impacted that because it was starting to be on the news every day.
All of the missing college girls are white females 18 to 21 years of age.
Especially when the president was intentionally misleading not only the American people, but the Congress as well.
At work, we had the radio on all day long because people were listening to the Watergate hearings. But it just seemed to go on forever. But the reason I was listening was that they would break in with bulletins about these abductions.
I would just like to caution all young ladies that they do not leave with a stranger.
All the women were scared. All young women were, it was on our mind.
We just want to caution the young women of our community.
I remember just feeling sick. What I was hungry to hear was that somebody had been arrested for it, so I could stop thinking about it. There was a real pattern. The women that had been abducted all had long hair, as did I. And I mean, I was older than the college students, and so it didn't really fit the profile, but still had the long hair parted in the middle. And so I was scared to death. Most women were. And I think people that fit a profile felt extra scared.
We were stopped in our tracks. Everything changed overnight. As time marched on, we saw that this was being duplicated multiple times. And it was frightening. We didn't know that there were predators like that out there. We had no idea. We had no idea. No idea. I mean, it just stopped us in our tracks. It was like our fairy tale world had stopped for a moment.
In these last 5 cases, they just vanished for no apparent reason, and we feel that we haven't come to the end of our line here, that there's a good possibility that this could happen again.
It was very eerily close to the bone for all of us, and in personal, intimate ways. Everybody knew somebody who knew one of the victims. My wife went to school with Linda Healy, and if you lived here at the time, as I did, people dropped out of colleges, they went back home. It was a real reversal in some ways for young women who were feeling more and more empowered.
These girls are all becoming educated. They were becoming powerful young women and getting to the point with an education that they could make a difference in the world.
You're starting to feel like you can do anything, and all of a sudden you get walloped by this sense of helplessness. The attendance in my class tripled. I was teaching one class 3 times a week. I ended up teaching 3 times a day, 5 days a week, and 2 on Saturday. Until there were so many classes, I couldn't teach them all.
The first couple of years, things were going really splendidly, but he wasn't ready to commit. Ted didn't want to get married, even though I was bugging him all the time to commit to me. Every time it started to get weird with Ted, I convinced myself that the problem was me. I think it had a lot to do with self-esteem. So I was really perplexed about what was going on. Things were just plain weird because he was going to be moving away at the end of the summer. He had applied to law school at the University of Utah and got accepted. And it was really unclear about whether we were going to move together or not. When I would say, "What about me coming with you?" He'd say, "Well, you can come if you want." And it was like so non-enthusiastic that I thought, "Oh, I don't want to." But, I mean, I fell in love with him from day one. We had several good years where it was just really fun and intense and wonderful. And I think kind of like almost any addiction or any drug, you keep thinking of the first part of something and you think you can get back to that state. Whereas things started to change, but I still was hopeful that we'd be in love like we were in the beginning.
I was sad that we were losing him because I felt that we were. I mean, I felt that their relationship had not been as close, and I felt that our relationship had taken this really horrid turn. I remember we were playing hide and go seek is how this started. He had hid under a blanket and I came out to the living room and I pulled the blanket off him and he's naked and I say in shock, "You're naked?" And he says, "Well, yeah, that's because I can turn invisible, but my clothes can't and I didn't want you to see me." And I'm chewing on that, but he's running back to the place you touch not to be it, and I have to kind of just give up because I don't want to be it, and I'm running and I'm thinking, and it just devolved from there. But my charitable child explanation I wanted to give him was that he got carried away with the fun of the game. That he always broke rules in these various ways, and that this was just another way he just wasn't really like other grown-ups.
Did you tell your mom?
No, it wasn't until many years later that I told her. I didn't want Ted to get in trouble. I didn't want him to have to go away. I didn't want him to be banished, which I was sure that he would have been. And I didn't want to see my mom hurt.
Many times we'd gone over to the Yakima River and floated down the river. So we were doing it again on a warm, sunny day. So we were just floating along. It was just beautiful, serene. And I was sitting on the edge of the raft. And without warning, he just popped up and pushed me by the shoulders, pushed me off the raft. I was breathless because it was so cold and it was so unexpected. I was so shocked that he did that. I just fortunately grabbed a rope that was hanging loose on the raft so that he didn't float away from him. And when I looked at him, he looked like just vacant. It was the strangest look, like he was looking through me. He didn't reach out to help me back in. It was like he was far, far away in his head. It was really, really disturbing.
Lake Sammamish was, up into the 60s, it was a pretty kind of remote, idyllic place. It had a kind of hokey, charming, old quality to it. But on that day, July 14th, anybody who knows Seattle knows that when the sun is shining and it's a beautiful day, people want to be outside. And they came in droves that day. There was something like 40,000 people there that day. He was getting turned down, and I just kept watching him, and he eventually ended up being literally right in front of me and approached a young girl. She was a young, attractive, blonde girl, and he asked her words to the effect, "I need some help." She's saying, "I just got here," kind of a thing. So obviously going through her mind is, I'd like to help you out, but, I'm here to relax. He kept on and on and on, and he talks her into whatever he talked her into. He said something about a catamaran. And ultimately, she gets up reluctantly because she's like head down, and I can't believe I'm doing this, and then started walking back past me
she had this frown on her face like, you know, I'm helping this guy when I should be just, you know, enjoying myself on the beach. And the end result is she's no longer with us because of her being a nice person.
Later on that day, Denise Naslin, she had just gone to the bathroom and she had her boyfriend there along with other people. And why she would just disappear like this and not show up, something was wrong.
I was in the shower when he called me. It was the weekend after we'd gone rafting. And so I was mad at him for what he did, although we were starting to talk again. And he was all chipper sounding. He said, "You want to go eat something?" And I said, "Okay." I thought it was kind of odd because we still weren't getting along really well. He came right over and I got dressed and we went to this bowling alley and ate hamburgers. That's when I noticed that his eyes were really close together. You know, his eyes the weekend before had been really weird, and then they were really red. And of course, I didn't think anything of it. And he wanted to go home and sleep because he was feeling sick. And in hindsight, I always thought that was really odd.
People were just shocked that there could be 2 abductions within hours of each other from a crowded space. What happened here?
As with all searches of this kind, the police and the searchers have to contend with the grim idea that there might have been foul play, but there really are no clues, no theories as to the disappearance of the 2 girls.
We recognize the tremendous job that all of the police officials have been doing in this area, the search and rescue units, everyone has just been tremendous. But if the addition of individuals and private groups, the information that they might be able to get that would be helpful, can help with the return of our daughter, we would do anything to facilitate that. She's a beautiful, wonderful girl.
So far, we've gotten a few leads, and a few volunteers who apparently have seen these girls have come forward.
There were potential 40,000 witnesses to this, and many of them saw or overheard or were approached themselves. He would approach someone and say, "Hi, my name is Ted."
The individual had been overheard saying his name was Ted, so all of a sudden our suspect had a nickname.
After Lake Sammamish, I went to the campus newspaper and took in the sketches of Ted, and they did a full page of his face, said, "Have you seen this man?" And he may have been in Ellensburg. The day, or maybe the day after that was in the newspaper, a young woman ran into my office and was pounding on the newspaper, "I've seen him, I've seen him, I've seen him." And then she tells me there's another young woman. It was the same day that Susan Rancourt disappeared from the library. She said that she was approached by a man that looked like the sketch, and that he had a bandage on his arm or a cast. They weren't coincidental. They were planned. And that was the first time that I had concrete evidence that these were all related.
I used to get phone calls from the detectives about Georgianne, and it was right after the Lake Sammamish incidents. And once it came out that they were missing and they talked about this cast thing and needing assistance, I thought, wow, I wonder if that was him. The thing that got me is, "Can you help me? I can't get this up there. Can you help me?" And that's exactly what he said to me.
I was brought in to this case after the women went missing at the state park because I was involved then in a national project on rape and violence, and was asked, along with another psychologist from the Seattle Police Department, to do a profile based on evidence we were looking at that point. I thought he was manipulative. I thought he was from the middle, maybe even upper class. I thought that most of his world revolved around women, and he was after a type, but the type is related more to the inexperience, naivete, rather than the sexuality or high probability of consensual sexual intercourse. He wasn't looking for consent. He was looking to overcome and overpower these women. We believed his name was Ted. The killer was Ted. That Ted was not a common West Coast name. I had an intern at the time. We both agreed we only knew one Ted, and that was Ted Bundy. And we just went right on with our conversation. That was just not even in our minds, not at all. Just not, didn't tweak to it. I'm still carrying that around.
When I first saw the police artist sketch, that's when I said, oh my God, that looks like somebody who was in my class. It looks like him, but it can't be him. And my first thought was it was my duty, both to the authorities and to him, to get it cleared up. I called the King County Sheriff's Department because there was a hotline set up, and they were interested in the fact that it had been an abnormal psych course. They wanted to know more about his behavior in the course and whether he showed any abnormal behavior. I said, no. And they said, well, did he act really strange? And I said, no, not at all. There was nothing that I could see.
The morning when that front page composite came out, the foreman showed up at work, and he showed me, and I scrutinized that thing and looked from different angles. I couldn't see anybody that I knew. And then about 20 minutes later, and he walked over to Liz, and he dropped that paper in front of her, and Liz turned white. The blood just drained right out of her face.
And he'd underlined the name Ted and said, does this look like somebody you know? And it did. It looked like my Ted. And I just tried to brush it off. But I was really gripped by fear. Like, there's something wrong here. I looked at it over and over and over again, and when I got home, I started going through my photo albums and pulled out a picture of Ted that looked very similar, like the jawline was the same. I took the picture, went down to my friend and showed her, and we both were kind of stunned by how much it looked like Ted. She said to me, you don't go with somebody for 4 years and not know what they're about. How could you even think that? But there are all these coincidences. It's like I couldn't let it go. I also read in the paper that some witnesses from the abduction of Georgianne Hawkins had encountered a man with crutches. I was so shocked. I'd seen crutches in Ted's room. And so it's like, oh no. Moment by moment, having my mind switch around, like, could he be doing these things? It made no sense whatsoever.
For more Ted Bundy documentaries and the Ted Bundy movie, hit the